What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt back here with Darryl Slater for the latest episode of the Talk is Cheap podcast. We're coming off a win, which neither of us predicted, but in retrospect, maybe we should have, because the Panthers look like an absolutely terrible football team. Bad enough to the point where the Giants won 25-3. They deserve a lot of credit for that. Did a lot of things well that they'd struggled with, but I still didn't walk out of there exactly knowing what this Giants team is going to look like any confidence that they're going to beat this team every week kind of thing, right?
It's one of those wins that it's really hard to read too much into, just because the Panthers were shorthanded. Obviously, the Giants are shorthanded too, but the Panthers were shorthanded offensively. No Christian McCaffrey, most notably. Sam Darnold stinks. We've said it a million times, and so the Giants defense played well in a game where they should have played well, in the game where the team needed them to play well because of how shorthanded they were on offense. The Giants were They did exactly what they should have done defensively, and exactly what people envisioned from them coming into this year. Now, people also envisioned a lot more from them, which is playing really well against really good offenses, and they get the Chiefs on Monday and a chance to prove that this defense can stack a few good games. But they're still 2-5. Let's pump the brakes a little bit on crowning them, and let's see if they can do more.
Yeah, that's the thing. You pointed to the defense, and obviously we've been pretty critical of Patrick Graham and the defense this year because they've been really bad. The pass rush was terrible for a 3 or 4 week stretch. They had maybe their best pass rushing performance of the Patrick Graham era against the Panthers. Azeez Ojulari was great. Leonard Williams is great. Guys like Lorenzo Carter and O'Shane are still kind of invisible, and I think Carter might be hurt. So those were encouraging signs, but you need to see it against an offense that is, explosive like the Chiefs, that has a pretty good offensive line, has a quarterback in Patrick Mahomes that he's thrown a lot of interceptions, but he really doesn't make a lot of mistakes. So we're really going to find out what this defense is actually made of this week. And, the secondary played a lot better, and it probably helped to have pressure up front, but I still need to see it more than one game.
Oh, absolutely, and I think anyone should look at it like that. And even Patrick Graham, we asked him today, do you feel like this group has turned a corner, or do you want to see more? And basically he said he wants to see more. And that's a fair, reasonable response from a guy who came out last week and basically ripped his defense. And they responded. And they responded, like I said, in a game where they should have responded. If they had played poorly in that game, that would it would be a complete disaster. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. They did their jobs. They didn't do anything that deserves an insane amount of praise. They get just the right amount of praise for that. Now, if they go out and do it again against the Chiefs, I don't really care that the Chiefs are not having a great year. Have we all know they have the personnel.
And I think Joe Judge and Patrick Graham have made it a point to be like, it doesn't really matter what their record is.
Their personnel is so nasty. I mean, Kelsey, Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, who's covering Kelsey? The Giants have struggled against tight ends this year worse than him. So.
If they somehow find a way to limit him and limit Hill and limit Mahomes, man, give them all the credit in the world. And maybe they're on to something in terms of having a competitive season. But I think I'm still in the wait-and-see mode here.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think one thing we should do, because we've criticized him maybe as much as anyone not named Dave Gettleman, is praise Jason Garrett, who had a pretty good game plan this week. He rolled Daniel Jones out a lot. The offensive line was struggling, and they were able to overcome that. They had a trick play, which, maybe is getting a little overhyped because it's basically just the Philly special, and it's been repeated time and time again, but it worked. Dante Pettis threw a pass. Daniel Jones, one-handed catch. That was like a momentum shifter. He's still struggling to call the right plays in the red zone. They had one stretch where Kyle Rudolph, he keeps trying to get into open space, which doesn't make sense because Kyle Rudolph might be as fast as us. Not an exaggeration. He's a nice guy, but pretty slow. And so he had the end zone in front of him and no defenders, and he couldn't get there in time. Got called out of bounds, and they had 3 more plays where they ran it. They ran it, did a play action that didn't work, and then ran it again and got stuffed. And they've only had 1 touchdown in the red zone or something like that all year, which is crazy. But again, Jason Garrett, he called a smart game. He called the kind of plays that you kind of wonder why he doesn't, adjust in this way every week. It seems like he's always stuck in his conservative ways a lot of times, but he's done a much better job this year. I wouldn't say he's been a revelation because they still are only averaging 19 points a game. But it's been better than it was last year, which is a very low bar. And if you can, call plays to Daniel Jones' strengths more often, then this offense will be better. But again, this is another thing we have to wait and see. Is he going to revert back to form this week? Especially, it looks like Saquon, Kenny Golladay, and Kadarius Toney will all probably not play again. Sterling Shepard should be back, so he's still shorthanded again. No Andrew Thomas. So we'll see. I'm very curious to see what the game plan looks like against the Chiefs, whose defense is pretty bad.
The Chiefs' defense has been a disaster, and I think when you look at that last game, and Jason Garrett was sort of creative by necessity, just because he was missing, and he even said it basically today, and in so many words as he's ever going to say that, is like they were missing playmakers, and their line was bad, worse than it usually is, and so they had to do things, move the pocket, move Daniel Jones around, in order to account for that, which is what good offensive coordinators do. They adjust to what their personnel is out there. So, the trick play, like you said, not exactly reinventing the wheel. And they, no one in the Giants coaching staff claimed to have done.
No, even Joe Judge said it wasn't that original. Yeah,
right. But you expose your quarterback like that. I guess it gets a lot of hype because number one, it worked. Number two, Daniel Jones made an awesome play. He's a really good athlete. We all know that. He's a really, he moves well, even though he looked a little awkward on that play. Like, the guy can run. He's a good athlete. He's a former basketball player. So give him credit for that. But, you're obviously airing the ball out and exposing him to a hit. And don't forget about whether he had a concussion previously or not. You're airing him out there, and he could have gotten just destroyed. He could have gotten a shoulder injury.
And you're relying on a non-quarterback putting the ball in the right spot, so he's not putting him in harm's way kind of thing.
Yeah, right? It's such a risky play. In the narrative around it is this triumphant moment, but I think maybe not the wisest thing to do there. But setting that aside, I think you look at the rest of what Garrett did in that game, and it obviously doesn't get as much attention as the trick play, but talking about moving the pocket around and doing motion type stuff that he really hadn't done a lot of. I think that those are good signs that he can adjust and play well against a good defense when they're not at full strength. And let's be honest, the Panthers have a pretty good defense.
Yeah.
The Chiefs it's weird, they were supposed to be a lot better than this defensively, and then they
still
just
have Spags, yeah.
Yeah, and they just haven't done that. And so, they're coming off a brutal 27-3 loss in Tennessee. There's going to be an angry Kansas City team.
Yeah, it's a get-right game for them.
For sure, no doubt. So that's why I still look at this as a game that's going to be a big-time uphill challenge for the Giants to win.
With the whole Garrett thing, just watching the way he called the plays, it does. It's probably going to be what if all year because all these guys are injury prone at this point. But it does make you wonder what this offense could look like with everybody there. Because I think that play was a Kadarius Toney play. They for sure have that designed for Kadarius. He's a former quarterback. They probably were going to do more wildcat these last couple weeks if he hadn't gotten hurt. It doesn't seem like he's going to play this week. They definitely shouldn't rush him back. Ankle injuries are tough. We've seen Saquon a couple years ago get rushed back, and he has an ankle injury right now. And you wrote about Kenny Golladay today, and that was today, right?
It was.
Yeah. The way he's had basically every possible lower body injury this year, but
yeah.
Of those guys, who do you think they need back the most? I think Andrew Thomas would be number one for me, but I'm not including him in that list.
So if you're just talking about the skill players, Kenny Golladay, Saquon Barkley, Kadarius Toney. Let's just say those three because it looks like Sterling Shepard.
Kind of feel like Kadarius.
I think
they can do so much with him.
Yes, I think you can
weirdly,
live without.
Which is crazy to say. Yeah,
we know that they can live without Saquon Barkley because they did it last year.
Yeah, and Devontae Booker is no good, and they still were fine. They survived.
Right. I think the Toney thing, he adds an air of unpredictability to your offense that, and the versatility is just such. Yeah, it's important to have your number one receiver, and Kenny Golladay, that would be important. But I think in terms of the domino effect of opening things up for other guys, Kadarius Toney has that sort of non-statistical effect. He can be in there for a play where he's not targeted or the ball, he doesn't have a catch, but his presence in terms of what are they going to do? And it's funny because we talked in the opening, after maybe the opening game, they had a limited package for Toney, right? And the narrative was oh man, you put him out there, you're going to run that exact play. But now it's now
you
put him out there, you don't know what you might run.
See, that's the thing.
Done a bunch of things with him.
Exactly, and that's why it's confusing the way they used him at first. And then the thing about him is he doesn't need to necessarily be open. It doesn't necessarily matter who's even covering him because he's a guy that can make people miss after the catch and stuff. So
he's a very much of a sandlot type player, whereas Kenny Golladay is more of your traditional big-bodied receiver.
But
they could use him.
I will say they certainly do miss Golladay, I think, because he's a guy that attracts attention. And in that Saints game he looked really good, and then since then it's been tough. They spent a lot of money on that guy. They need him to be healthy and playing.
He played 5 games last year, hip and hamstring. He's played really 4.5 games this year, hamstring in camp. He's got the knee now. He dealt with the hip and groin on the injury report that didn't cost him any games, but let's be honest.
It's always something, yeah.
He's had one really good game, and the rest of the games have been either average or, he's had one really good game,
or he's been
3 average games, and then he didn't have a catch in Dallas, but didn't play much before he got hurt. So it's early. Look, we're 7 out of 17 games in. It's more than 40% of the season. 40% of the season for a guy who essentially has like a 3-year, $54 million contract. And he has not been worth the money so far.
Yep.
So, they need him to get back and stay healthy. Like, that's a huge concern for this guy. We all said it before when they signed him. They're giving this guy number one receiver money. Not only the question is, can he be a number one receiver? Can he stay in the field? So the answer so far has been no. And look, I mean, some of that is not really the fault of the player. Some of it is bad luck. Some of it is durability. I get it. But, like, that's just the reality in NFL. If you're not able to stay in the field, then
the cliche of the best ability is availability.
Thank you. I was looking at that cliche last night when I was writing the story, and I couldn't come up with it. And but yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, and this was, Gettleman always had lines over the years where he didn't want to sign guys with injury histories because hurt guys get hurt, I think is his line. Stay hurt, yeah. And that's been the case. I mean, Dory Jackson's been relatively healthy, but the other guys have all been banged up or not good that he signed. Speaking of injuries, we should talk a little bit about the big news that they had this week injury-wise was Jabrill Peppers. Tough break. I don't think he was having a particularly good season. He was losing some playing time. He's in his contract year. So he ruptured his ACL and he suffered a high ankle sprain in that last game against the Panthers. The season's done. I mean, those are two injuries on their own that are like long-term. Like high ankle sprain is the one you never want to hear a guy get. And he ruptured his ACL, which I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but that sounds worse than tearing the ACL. I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a partial tear.
That's not only is he going to miss the season, his free agency value is now shot if he had any, but he's not going to be able to play at the start of next season.
I mean, it's a really bad break.
It's probably a year-long recovery process for him.
I'm sure, yeah, from that serious of an injury. Like, obviously, the ankle he'll be recovered from in, no matter a few months or whatever, but the ruptured ACL is, and this was on a punt return, and it was one of those where, and the Giants have had maybe like 2 or 3 of these this year. The CJ Board, this one, and Nick Gates, where it's like immediate. Guys
right away.
Are like guys, they hear something probably. They say you can hear that pop, and guys are like waving the trainers out.
Yeah, Jabrill. Yeah, I think that happened with Jabrill the other day, right? I think I remember that like the opposing guys were like,
"Let's go," because I think you can hear that. Like that's what I've heard guys say is you can hear that pop so loud, and yeah, I mean he did walk off the field, but with an ACL you could walk with it.
There's been so many cases like that. That's the weird part about it's hard because sometimes you get kind of like, oh, he's walking, maybe he's gonna be okay. Like I covered the Eagles before I covered the Giants, and there was a post game where Jay Ajayi literally like complained about not getting the ball enough post game, and then we found out later that night or the next day that he tore his ACL. Like so he clearly didn't know he had torn his ACL at that point, and the Eagles was complaining about his role. Didn't even play another snap the rest of the year.
That's wild. And they were doing the thing where they moved the kneecap. To check for the torn ACL. You could see that's what they were looking for. So that's a horrible break for, he's a Jersey guy, right?
Yeah.
Grew up right up the road here, went to school at least.
Went to Paramus,
in Paramus Catholic and Don Bosco. And so obviously a big-time recruit coming out of here. People have known him around here for a long, long time. Came back to the Giants in the Beckham trade. We all know that. 5th-year option this year. And the Giants... Look, I mean, he is not worth a first-round pick. He's a solid NFL player who has value on special teams.
Yeah, and the thing they pushed was that it was like they were getting another first-round pick.
I mean, that hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
He was obviously a captain for this team, so there's value on several levels within the locker room. And let's be honest, like they could have moved him and potentially in a trade and gotten a late-round pick for him.
That's part of it.
And freed up half his salary and kicked that salary to next year. That's obviously not happening now, so it's a bummer on several levels for the Giants, whether they were going to trade him or weren't going to trade him. And then also it's really tough for him because whether he stays here with the Giants or not, he's not getting diddly squat for money next year. And it's a small earning window. And he plays a physical position, and it's just a tough break for a guy who, look, by all accounts, tries hard, works hard, and is a good leader.
He's a captain.
Yeah, and I don't know how much like defensively they're going to necessarily miss him because he had kind of been phased out defensively, with them using Logan Ryan and Xavier McKinney. But
the depth is at least an issue at safety.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt for sure. He's a more than solid player, and
their punt returner and all that. Yeah.
So that they're going to have a few holes to plug, and we're like punt returner. That's one they're going to have to address because now the Board got hurt on kickoff return 2 weeks ago, then Peppers last week. So, yeah, some moving pieces for sure on special teams.
I do wonder if, Peppers is going to have to sign like a 1-year prove-it type thing, and I'm curious if he just comes back here. I don't know if he's especially happy here right now, so maybe not. But he's a New Jersey kid, so maybe he uses next year as like his rehab year for a lot of it, and then he comes back and tries to rehab his value in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, the Giants aren't going to have much cap space, so they would happily bring him back, I would say. And that's a good segue. You talked about, like, the trade thing. Evan Engram is, like, the big name right now. So the trade deadline is going to happen between now and our next podcast, I would imagine. So
Tuesday at 4.
How do you think the Giants approach it, number one? And number two, do you think Evan Engram is here at this time next week?
Man.
It kind of feels like they're not going to do much, doesn't it? It feels kind of like last year where they're like, we can still compete.
They're talking themselves into being a legitimate
And
team.
John Mayer's whole thing is like, I don't like the message it sends when we trade everybody away.
Yeah.
Which is why they've never done it. Not never. They did it that one year with like Snacks Harrison and Eli Apple.
But those were guys who, the Eli Apple was a problem guy.
Yeah, it was like clearing out
Evan
the
Ingram's
lock.
not a problem guy.
Yeah.
Damon Harrison clearing out a big bad contract. I mean, Evan Engram is not only not a problem guy, obviously, look, I mean, he's been an underwhelming player in the field. He's not a problem guy.
He's not a bad guy in any way. Yeah, the coaches love him.
The cap number is not bad. It's $6 million this year. Yes, you could roll half of it to next year.
It's really like 3.7 or something if you factor in what he's been paid already or something like that.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, we're 7/18 through the year because the guys get paid.
Yeah,
18.
exactly. Yeah.
So if you look at he plays. Even doesn't play. He's already got paid.
You get
for
paid
Kansas
anyway,
City.
yeah.
So you're looking at 9 whatever. I can't do the math. Whatever. 10 games out of the 18. So that would move him. Move about a little more than half of the cap space to next year. So they're not going to get much for him on
that's
draft
the thing.
pick. I mean, like
so look, the Zach Ertz trade the Eagles got a 5th round pick and a young corner in return. I think that would be the very high end of what they could get.
Yeah.
It's funny. I did see a report that there are multiple teams interested. That it felt very clearly like the Giants is trying to see maybe if there's interest out there. And I don't. It's one of those reports where like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, to what level? Interest is such a nebulous thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the one thing you can't. If Dave Gettleman's still around here, you can't put it past him that he would pull Leonard Williams thing again.
Bring in somebody, right?
Like you think they won't. And Joe Judge had like a line about how he's thinking about the long term, not just this year. So you would think maybe he wouldn't want that to happen, but it's happened before, so you can't rule it out.
For sure.
And yeah, so then what do you think happens on Monday night?
Yeah, I don't think the Giants are going to win this game. I can't remember what I picked it for our picks, but I think this is probably a 10 to 7 point game at best for the Giants. Yes, the Chiefs' defense is vulnerable. I just don't see the Giants being able to do much in terms of stopping Patrick Mahomes in that group. So probably 31 or 28 for the Chiefs. But I'll go 31-21 Chiefs.
Yeah, I think I had something like 28-21 Giants because if they can't score in the Chiefs defense, then we can go back to calling for Jason Garrett's head. I mean, he's probably going to survive the season, but that's kind of where I'm at. I get that, in theory, the fact that we can even talk about the possibility they can be competitive this game is a step up from what we would have said a week ago. But I think the Panthers game kind of did a little too, the Panthers game and the Chiefs loss last week maybe swung things a little too far. And they're gonna be angry. Andy Reid is not a guy that usually loses many games in a row historically. So yeah, I would pretty safe bet that the Giants lose this game, I would say. All right, so we can wrap it up on that note. We'll get you guys back next week. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
In the lead up to World Audio Drama Day on October 30th, Acast is featuring our favorite fiction podcasts. Here's one we think you'll love.
Obey, mother, to the voice of another. Widen your embrace or remain in disgrace. Obey, mother, to the blood of a stranger.
Blood magic, voodoo magic, old gods, new gods, we've got it all. This is Desperado.
Use hashtag Acast Audio Fiction Week on socials to tell us about your favorite fiction podcasts. Acast recommends.